Okay, the first in a short series of screencasts to help you with your revision for the Principles of Marketing exam. The first topic that we're going to talk about is business to business and business to consumer customers. So we're going to look at some of the differences. It's important that you revise this for the upcoming exam in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so whether we are a business or a consumer, so whether we're an organisational buyer or we're somebody that's buying just for ourselves, there is always an exchange process that goes on. So it's important that you are familiar with this exchange process, because this is something that's really at the fundamentals of marketing. And this notion that it's about us exchanging something of value for something of value, essentially. And remember that we're always in marketing looking at balancing out that equation of perceived benefits versus perceived sacrifices. So from a customer point of view, whether I'm a business or a consumer, I'm going to be looking at what are the sacrifices that I'm going to make, whether they are monetary, whether it's the cost of time, whatever it might be, versus the benefits that I might get. So whilst it's important that you, in a question like this, are able to recognise the differences between business to business and business to consumer transactions and the nature of marketing, it's also important that you recognise that there are some similarities. Remember that when somebody buys for an organisation, they are also a consumer. So there isn't, there are overlaps is what I'm saying, and there are similarities. If you're a family making a decision on behalf of a group of people, your family, that can be a little bit like a decision-making unit within a business, where there's more than one person that might be involved in that decision. So fundamentally, that's the start of kind of some of the differences. So the number of people that are likely to be involved in and influence the decisions that are being made. But remembering that it's all about this exchange of something for value from both a customer point of view, but also from a company point of view too. Okay, so consumer buyer behaviour, so B2C is interested in the way that we make purchases as individuals, and that might be for our own individual consumption as a person on our own. So we might be both the customer that buys and also the person that consumes the product or service, but equally it could be for a household, so it could be for our family. And there might be other influences there. For example, I'm only likely to buy products, various sort of food-based products, for argument's sake, that my children are going to consume. So I don't want to buy things that they're not going to eat and are going to get wasted, and therefore I'm subject to their influences as well as my own. Organisational buying behaviour is interested and concerned with how purchases and decisions are made on behalf of businesses, so profit-making businesses, but also organisations, remembering that many organisations that are customers, such as a university, is going to buy paper, it's going to buy different stationery supplies, it's going to buy all kinds of stuff. Businesses are going to buy things either for their own use as a business, so they might be buying laptops, software, furniture, again stationery, but they also might buy raw materials that they are going to add something to, or products that they are then going to sell on. So there's a whole variety of different organisational buying contexts, as there are consumer buying contexts, and in both of these different situations, it can be relatively simple, but equally it can be relatively complex and not quite straightforward. So it's, try and familiarise yourself with a number of different examples that you might have in both consumer B2C and B2B or B2G situations, and make sure you've got some examples that you could use and explain. Okay, so business to consumers, in terms of distribution, it tends to be very product driven and about maximising the value of the transaction. We often tend to have large target markets. We tend to make go through simple buying process. If you're familiar with the customer decision making process, we went over it in the last seminar when we're looking at revision. We have importance, we place importance on things like brand identity. But remember that often that we're making some really generic, quite sort of sweeping statements here, and it's very much specific to the transaction, the situation that we're in, and the nature of the product or service that we're buying, as to how much of that is based on status and desire, and how much of it is based on more kind of functional attributes and features, things that do things for us that we might be buying. Business to business, relationships arguably more important in business. Often we're buying items that are much more commodity based, so there's very little functional difference between competitors, which means that relationships become all the more important. It tends to be a longer process because there are often added complexities. If you're a government organisation and you've got public accountability, then often you have to go out to tender, and that process needs to be really transparent, which means it's a little bit longer and more complex. And often there's an element of negotiation that you don't really get in consumer transactions. So we tend to be more rational in our decision making. It's not so much about things like social status or what the brand says about us, and tends to be more based on what the products or services are going to do for us, but equally the relationship that we have with the person from one of the organisations that we might buy from. So those relationships are really important, particularly in business, and networking becomes a really important marketing activity for those relationship managers. And often we will find that organisations have key account managers who will look after different clients or businesses. So if we just look at the decision making process from a customer point of view, from a B2B point of view, sorry. So often from a customer point of view, we know there's a problem recognition, there's the information search, evaluation of options, and then purchase choice, store choice, and purchase, and then post-purchase decisions. You can see that there's this kind of a little bit more extended process here. There might be some concerns that we go back to individual suppliers to try and resolve. You wouldn't really do that in a customer scenario. I guess there could be scenarios where you might do that, where if you're buying something like car insurance, you might go back to your renewal option and say, oh, I've had a better price with these different features from this particular company, and they might revisit and try and compete with that. But in most transactions, it's fairly straightforward, whereas in business to business, there's this real element of negotiation that we can see here at the bottom, which influences the decision as well as the relationship. And it can be kind of non-product based factors that influence the decision. So it could be things like speed of service, delivery, and of course those relationships end up influencing whether businesses choose one supplier or another. So when sort of differentiating between business to business and business to consumer, fundamentally we tend to have less B2B customers because the value of the transactions tend to be higher. For B2C, we're going to have more transactions because the transactional value is lower. There are similarities, but there are some key differences. So read around this topic as well. Have a look in the Kotler and Armstrong book, which is available as an ebook, to sort of develop your understanding and knowledge around this area too.